We just sought the Lord, and we just said, God, we know you're going to speak something life-giving to us that we can, in turn, give to others.
His name is Israel Houghton. Dating my husband. People thought he was married.
For years, the public only heard one version of the story. Headlines focused on the divorce, the affair rumors, and Israel Houghton's new marriage, while Meleasa Houghton remained almost completely silent. But behind that silence was a chapter few people ever explored. Now, as old questions resurface and overlooked details come back into focus, many are asking whether the full story was ever told, or whether the most unsettling truths were hidden in plain sight. Where she is now, and the quiet that refuses to break. In the summer of 2025, a podcast clip started spreading across the internet, and for a few days it felt like the entire gospel world was talking about a marriage that had ended almost a decade earlier. Israel Houghton sat down with Angie Martinez and told the story of his life all over again. The failure, the shame, the woman who prayed for him and later became his second wife. People cried, listening to it. People argued about it in the comments. And somewhere far from all of that noise, in a quiet parish in Bermuda, the one person who actually lived through the wreckage said absolutely nothing. Her name is Meleasa Houghton. If you followed contemporary worship music at any point in the last 30 years, you have heard her fingerprints even if you never once heard her name. Today, she keeps a single low-key presence online. She posts about her grown children and their music. She does not post about him. She has never posted about him. In all the years since the divorce, she has not sat for one interview telling her side. She has not written one bitter book, and she has not walked onto one daytime television set to explain what happened to her. By 2026, her name barely trends at all, and that appears to be exactly how she wants it. Now, this is the part that makes people genuinely uncomfortable. In a culture that rewards the loudest voice in the room, where the person who tells their story first usually gets to control how everyone remembers it, Meleasa did the opposite of everything the algorithm demands. She let the man who broke the marriage narrate it. She let the woman who married him narrate it. She let strangers on the internet fill in every blank with whatever they already wanted to believe, and she never corrected a single word of it. If you have ever been wronged by somebody and then had to sit there and watch them tell everyone a softer, cleaner version of what really went down, you know exactly how much restraint that takes. Most of us cannot make it 3 days without defending ourselves. She has been gone almost 10 years. So the lazy assumption people make is that she stayed quiet because she had nothing worth saying, because she was just the wife in the background while her husband built the empire. That assumption is completely wrong, and what she actually built alongside him, brick by brick and song by song, was far bigger than most people outside that world ever understood. The songs she wrote with her own hands. Long before the scandal, before the headlines and the courtrooms, there were two young people in Pittsburgh who believed God had put them together on purpose. Israel had been leading worship since 1989. Meleasa was already a singer, already pulled toward the church stage, a woman who had skipped college entirely because the calling in front of her felt louder than any classroom ever could. They met around a ministry engagement in the early 1990s, and by 1994, they were married. She was 30, he was 23. Almost from the first day, the whole thing was stacked on 3 priorities in a very specific order. God first, then music, then ministry. In 1995, they founded New Breed Ministries in Houston together, alongside a producer named Aaron Lindsay. The group that grew out of it, Israel and New Breed, did something nobody in worship music had really attempted. They folded gospel and jazz and rock and reggae and Latin rhythm into one living sound, and it connected. The records climbed. Real landed high on the gospel chart. Lev from Another Level went all the way to #1. Alive in South Africa was recorded in front of thousands of people in Cape Town. and became a landmark record in the genre. Meleasa was not standing in the back, clapping along. She was writing. Her name sits inside the official credits of some of the most sung worship songs of that entire era. She helped write How Awesome Is Our God, the song that later took home a Dove Award and earned a Grammy nomination. She helped write a song called Others, and Israel himself once admitted that the rawest lines in it came straight off her pen. He said she had a habit of writing strong, honest lyrics, and he pointed to the opening words, "I see the state of the world, and it grieves me," and called that pure Meleasa. She was not a supporting character inside his story. In a very literal sense, she was one of the authors of it. And that is precisely what makes the next part so brutal. Because while she was pouring out all of those songs about a faithful God, the man singing them right beside her had already stopped being a faithful husband. The confession that broke the internet. On the 22nd of February, 2016, Israel Houghton went on Facebook and detonated his own reputation with his own hands. He wrote that after more than 20 years of marriage and a long separation, he and Meleasa were officially divorced. Then he went further than most public figures ever dared to go. He wrote, "Several years ago, I failed and sinned in my marriage." He said it was new to a lot of people, but it was not new to the two of them, because they had already been quietly trying to work through it for more than 5 years. For the outside world, it landed like a bomb going off. This was one of the most respected worship leaders alive, a man whose songs opened church services from Houston to Johannesburg, admitting in plain English that he had been unfaithful. He asked for forgiveness. He said he was in the middle of a process of restoration. He said that even though he was sorry, and even though he believed he had been forgiven, he would live with the consequences of what he had done for the rest of his life. What that Facebook statement admitted was already devastating enough to end a 22-year marriage. He had failed. He had cheated. He had asked the entire Christian world to forgive him. Millions of people read those words and assumed that was the full extent of it. A good man who slipped, confessed, and was trying to make it right. It was not the full story. It was barely the opening line of it, because underneath that carefully worded apology sat a secret so large that when it finally surfaced, it did not simply explain the divorce. It reached backward and reframed the entire marriage that came before it. The family nobody knew existed. The name that changed everything belonged to a woman most of the gospel world had never heard of, Devon Moreno. And what came out about her was not a single mistake, not one weak moment at a low point in a marriage. It was a relationship that reportedly ran for around 5 years, all while Israel was still very much married to Meleasa. Then came the detail that pulled the air straight out of the room. During that affair, 2 children had been born. A son named Kingston arrived in 2012. A second son named Christian arrived in 2014. Both of those boys were born while Meleasa was still his wife. Both of them were born while she was still writing worship songs with him, still standing beside him on stage, still singing to arenas full of people who believed they were watching a model Christian marriage. In the very same stretch of years when their ministry was arguably at its highest point, when the awards were rolling in and the crowds kept growing, there was an entire second family quietly taking shape in the shadows. 2 little boys who existed, who had birthdays, who knew him as their father, and a wife at home who had no idea a single one of them was real. If you have ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a whole separate life you were locked out of, then you already understand that the pain is never only about the betrayal itself. It is about every memory suddenly getting rewritten in your own head, every anniversary she had celebrated, every song they built together during those years, every single time she took his word at face value. All of it now had to run back through a filter of doubt. She was left to wonder which moments had been real and which ones were simply a performance staged on top of a secret. And a secret that size does not stay buried on its own forever. Soon, it would stop being a matter of whispers and rumors, because the state of Texas was about to drag the entire thing into a courtroom where carefully worded public statements count for absolutely nothing. The court case that dragged it into the light. In June of 2016, only months after the divorce went public, the Child Support Division of the Texas Attorney General filed suit against Israel Houghton. The purpose was cold and clinical: establish paternity for the boys and lock in the child support that comes with it. The state was not interested in his reputation or the size of his ministry. It wanted proof, and it wanted money on the table for 2 children. And the list of demands that came with that suit tells you just how serious it had become. The state asked for his tax returns. It asked for his bank and savings account statements. It asked for his retirement account information, his health insurance details, and a full accounting of his income. This was no longer a rumor being tossed around in the comments. This was a government agency reaching directly into the finances of a celebrated worship leader to force accountability for a hidden family. For a man whose entire public identity had been constructed on the idea of integrity, this was the nightmare scenario come to life. The one private thing he had managed to keep out of even his own confession was now sitting in a stack of legal filings that any reporter could pull. And then, almost as fast as it had flared up, the case went quiet. In December of that same year, the suit was dropped. The official term was non-suited, which simply means the party pushing it forward chose to stop. Devon Moreno gave a short statement about the whole thing, and she framed it entirely in her own words. She said the suit had been dropped because of misleading information, and she added that her children were well taken care of, as they always had been. She never fully spelled out what that misleading information actually was. Israel's representatives, for their part, confirmed the one piece that mattered most to his image. They said he had provided, and would continue to provide, financial support for the children. So the legal storm passed. The filings stopped. The headlines cooled off. But the moral weight of it did not go anywhere. You can close a court case with a signature. You cannot unknow that 2 secret sons were fathered inside a marriage that the entire Christian world had been holding up as an example. That part simply hardened into a fact that everyone now had to carry around. And while all of that was still smoldering in the courts and the tabloids, another woman had already stepped fully into the spotlight right beside him. And her presence would twist the story into something the internet would end up arguing about for years. The woman who took her place. Her name is Adrienne Bailon. Long before Israel, she was a singer and an actress, and a host on a popular daytime talk show called The Real. The two of them had first crossed paths years earlier while working together on a Christian film, and by his account, that friendship slowly turned into something more, only after his marriage had already collapsed. Adrienne has always insisted that she did her homework before getting involved. She said her own family pushed her to see proof that his divorce was genuine, and that he showed her the paperwork already in motion. She even admitted that she once left a recording device running in his car, hoping to catch him if he was secretly talking to other women. When she went back to listen, she found something she genuinely did not expect. He was writing a worship song. In her own retelling, he was sitting in that car singing praises to God, and she realized there was nothing there to catch at all. Israel and Meleasa had filed their divorce under their initials instead of their full names, which is the reason reporters kept searching for the documents and kept coming up empty-handed. To Adrienne, that detail explained why the public kept accusing her of dating a married man. To the skeptics, It just looked like one more thing that had been deliberately kept quiet. 9 months after the divorce was finalized, Israel married Adrienne in Paris. 70 guests, a famous hotel, a proposal that had happened at the Eiffel Tower a few months before. For the people who loved Meleasa, watching that fairy tale wedding roll out so soon after the confession felt like salt being pressed straight into an open wound. Then came the moment the internet has never once let go of. Years into the marriage, Adrienne sat on her own talk show discussing a completely different celebrity cheating scandal, and she called cheating a cowardly move. She said, if you are unhappy, you should leave, get fully divorced, and only then start something new. One of her co-hosts called cheating the most deplorable thing a person could possibly do, and the audience at home did the math in a heartbeat. The woman saying those words had married a man who fathered 2 children with a mistress while still married to his wife of 22 years. The clip went viral. The threads exploded. The debate never fully died down. Through every single piece of it, the wedding photos, the talk show clips, the podcast confessions that resurfaced years later and made everyone cry all over again, one voice stayed completely absent from the entire conversation. Why her quiet is the loudest thing in the room. That absent voice belonged to the only person who had truly earned the right to use it. Meleasa never took the microphone. When the affair broke, she said nothing about it. When the second family surfaced, she said nothing about it. When her ex-husband remarried in Paris and told his redemption story on stage after stage, she offered no rebuttal at all. She did not name Devon Moreno. She did not drag Adrienne. She chose a kind of dignity that does not shout to be heard, the kind that simply stands still and steady while everyone else scrambles to explain themselves. Silence like hers is not weakness, and it is not denial. It is honestly one of the hardest things a wronged person can force themselves to do. Every instinct is screaming at you to defend your name, to post the receipts, to make certain the world hears your version of events. She swallowed all of it. She let the story get told badly rather than turn her own private pain into content for strangers to feast on. There is a bitter irony sitting right in the center of all of this, and it is the part that stays lodged in your chest. For more than 2 decades, Meleasa helped write songs about how faithful God is. Those songs became the very foundation of her husband's fame. And then, that same fame got used to sell a polished public story of failure and restoration that she never once agreed to star in. The theology of faithfulness that she poured onto the page was being performed night after night by a man who had quietly broken faith at home. She could have spent the rest of her life exposing that contradiction to anyone who would listen. Instead, she walked away from the spotlight completely and let her actual life do all the arguing for her. She reportedly settled into a quiet place far from the American noise. She raised children who went on to build their own careers in music and media. She kept one small corner of the internet where she talks about the people she loves and nothing else. She never remarried. She never sold the story. Everyone kept waiting for her to sell. So when a title promises you that Meleasa finally broke her silence, understand the real truth sitting underneath it. She never did. And that refusal held steady for almost 10 years while the entire world begged her to speak, may be the most powerful thing she has ever said. Her name did not have to trend for her story to carry weight. If you have ever chosen your own peace over your right to be heard, this one probably landed somewhere personal, so tell me in the comments what you believe her silence was really saying. And if you think there is more to this than either side has ever admitted, drop your take below and let us get into it together.